All right, so let's start with the big story that we are tracking on WION at this hour. Novak Djokovic, the player who's been dubbed as possibly one of the greatest of all time, believe it or not, has now been denied entry into Australia after he was first given clearance to in fact play at the Australian Open. His visa was first granted and then later cancelled. Djokovic has failed to meet with the requirements in Australia for an exemption to COVID-19 vaccine rules. The top-ranked tennis player, Djokovic, landed in Melbourne late on Wednesday. Djokovic had received a medical exemption from the Victorian state government. The certificate would have shielded him from strict vaccination rules that are in place. And this is, of course, for the first Grand Slam tournament of the year that starts on the 17th of January. But then federal border authorities did not accept the exemption. The Australian Border Force issued a statement saying that Djokovic failed to meet its entry requirements. The 20-time Grand Slam winner had to wait more than 8 hours at Melbourne's Tullamarine Airport. Now, the Australian Health Minister Greg Hunt has said that Djokovic was free to appeal this decision. Now, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison had warned the previous day. Remember, the warning by the Australian Prime Minister had come because of a lot of outrage on social media once it became known that Djokovic had been given an exemption to actually come forth and play at the Australian Open at Melbourne. It was public pressure essentially on social media that then made the Australian government to back off from its earlier decision of having granted him exemption, and then they said he simply cannot be given that exemption. Remember, Scott Morrison, once there was outrage on social media, he came forth and he was compelled to make the statement where he said that Djokovic will be on the next plane home if he cannot explain as to why the exemption needs to be given to him. This after the Australian government had already given him the exemption to come forth and play. Morrison has also defended the integrity of the exemption application process.
On the issue of Mr Djokovic, rules are rules. And there are no special cases. Rules are rules. It's what I said to you yesterday. That's the policy of the government and has been our government's strong border protection policies, and particularly in relation to the pandemic, that has ensured that Australia has one of the lowest death rates from COVID anywhere in the world. The ABF has done their job. Entry with a visa requires double vaccination or a medical exemption. I'm advised that such an exemption was not in place, and as a result, he is subject to the same rule as anyone else. I also want to stress that ultimately, this is the responsibility of the traveller.
All right, that is the Australian Prime Minister there making that statement once there was a lot of outrage on social media, once it became known that Novak Djokovic, the 20-time Grand Slam champion, had been given the go-ahead to come forth and play at the Australian Open. Now, all participants in the first Grand Slam of the year 2022 must be vaccinated against COVID-19 or should have a medical exemption. It is now incumbent on the Australian government to explain as to what prompted them in the first place to give the go-ahead for Novak Djokovic to actually come to Australia. And once Djokovic had landed there, and because of the social media outrage, the clearance that was given to him was revoked. Now, exemption is only granted after medical assessments by 2 panels of independent experts. Amongst the conditions allowing the entry without a vaccine happens to be if a person has had COVID-19 in the past 6 months. It has not been revealed if that was the case with Novak Djokovic. Tournament chief Craig Tilley has said that the defending champion had been given no special favour. Tilley said that Djokovic was urged to reveal as to why he had got the exemption, but it is the Australian government that needs to come forth and explain as to why he was given a clearance first and then why did the Australian government crumble under public pressure. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.